loves, welcome to the channel. I'm Liv and this is Orator Academy, where I help you improve your vocabulary one word at a time. Now today's word is brand, and no, it's not a particularly unique word. There's nothing unusual about it, but I thought I wanted to talk to you about it today because the etymology or the origin of the word is a really interesting one. So let's jump into the video. So when most people think about a brand, what we typically think of is Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Gucci, Nike, Prada, these huge companies who sell us these amazing products that we all know very well, and even if we don't buy them, we probably have seen the adverts a million times and we know of people who buy them, right? So these are the ideas we have about what a brand is nowadays. But the word brand and the idea of branding goes back way further than that, and I'm going to tell you all about it today. The word brand has two meanings. The first one is a type of product made by a particular company under a particular name, and that's the one we were just talking about. The second meaning is an identifying mark placed on cattle, and in former times that also used to be placed on criminals or slaves with a branding iron. So the word brand in its Indo-European use stems back to Old Norse and the word brander. Typically, that meant to burn a piece of wood to give light. So when an Old Norse guy said something about brander, it meant burning a piece of wood to give light. By the 1300s, that evolved to mean torch, right? Like we all know about the Olympics torch, and they run a relay and exchange the torch. That is what the meaning of burn came to be by the 1300s. By the 1500s, however, the meaning changed yet again, and this time it meant to place a mark on cattle or livestock to show ownership. And this new meaning of brand came into existence through a Spanish fellow called Hernando Cortez, who in 1541 moved over to America, to the New World, and he brought with him the idea of branding. So on his cattle, he would imprint a mark with 3 crosses to show that these cattle belonged to him. And American cowboys adopted the idea of using symbols to brand their cattle to show ownership. And I think this became pretty useful to protect against things like cattle theft, or if cattle got lost while they were grazing, or if someone's cattle had to share a large grazing ground with other cattle. The brands made it really easy to identify them and to separate whose cattle was whose. Cowboys, who were particularly loyal to the ranch they worked for, were known to ride for the brand. And what that means is that they used to imprint the brand of the ranch they worked for into their saddles and their tack, which meant that it became a permanent thing. They weren't going to take those saddles and tack to another ranch to go work on someone else's ranch with the brand from their previous ranch. So it was kind of like, in a way, a marriage. It was them saying, I'm committed to this ranch and I'm going to stay here. So because of that, I'm going to put your brand on my saddle and my tack. There's no record though of the cowboys themselves being branded like we see in the Paramount show Yellowstone, where the Duttons brand the cowboys or the criminals they take out of prison who are going to be their forever cowboys. There is no evidence of that actually happening in real life. But the use of the brand as a show of ownership dates back even further than the 1500s. As early as 3150 BC, that is 3,150 years before we started counting our years from 1 and then counted up to 2023, where we are now. The ancient Egyptians were using brands on their cattle. The ancient Egyptians were using hieroglyphic script as a marketing tool to brand their cattle, to show ownership, to show whose cattle belong to who, and I guess as a way of comparing who had the best looking cattle on the Egyptian plains. Not only were they branding cattle, there's actual historical evidence of the pharaoh Cheops using hieroglyphics branded into wood to create an advertisement for a runaway slave. But the ancient Egyptians weren't the only ones branding cattle or branding slaves. The ancient Romans were doing the same. The ancient Greeks also engaged in branding, where we would see the artisans who created terracotta pots and terracotta bowls, for example, leaving identifying marks on their products which showed exactly who made them. So what's the significance of branding? Especially in an economy like ancient Egypt, where there was no currency in use, there was no money in use, it was a bartering system, so people only exchanged goods for whatever goods they needed. Why was there even need for marketing or showing of ownership or whatever over cattle? What's the human need to always be saying, oh, I made this or I own this? In the case of the makers of bowls and terracotta pots, the answer is really simple. Branding a product ascribes prestige to the maker. It's in essence their way of saying, I made this and I'm really proud of the quality of my work. Putting a mark on the things you made is in essence a statement of pride in the quality of the product that you've made. So how did the word brand come to mean a type of product made by a particular company under a particular name? Well, that brings us to our friend Aristotle. Aristotle thought that in order to be convincing in our conversations, we need to apply three things. We need to apply ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is ethics. So in essence, Aristotle was asking, what moral or ethical values do we have that we want to transmit to the person or the people that we're speaking with? Pathos is the ability to generate an emotional connection, and logos is the ability to create a logical line of reasoning as to why someone should believe or do or buy something. And if you think about it, that's exactly what big brands do today. They don't use a branding iron anymore. Instead, they use their logo as a representation of their brand, and they use the ideas of ethos, pathos, and logos to cement their brand identity in your mind. So if I say, you're not you when you're hungry, or I'm loving it, you know exactly what brands I'm talking about, right? So if you're in the process of building a brand, now you know exactly what to do. You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. And if you did, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and share it with whoever you think might find this interesting. I'll see you in the next one.